So today we are starting with AI contract extraction, which is the topic of today's webinar. So thanks so much for joining us. My name is Martin Norley Matheson. I'm a customer success manager here at Ignite. Some of you may know me already. And my job is just to help customers understand how to use the platform and how we can deliver the most value for you guys. So work a lot with customers that are using contracts. And together with me, I have Alan as well. If you'd like to present yourself, Alan.
Yes, hello, my name is Alan. I'm a product manager at Ignite. I'm responsible for the contracts and savings journey, which means that I'm helping build out the solutions that make it easier, hopefully, to manage your contracts and realize savings. And super excited about this webinar. We have worked a lot with this and really want to make sure it can create value for all of you.
Perfect. So at the end, we'll open up for a Q&A, as I mentioned before. So please feel free to leave your questions if there's anything that you want to ask us. And of course, the topic of today is going to be AI contract extraction and how we can do that in Ignite currently. So AI contract extraction is tied to some of our core principles in Ignite. So we've built Ignite from the ground up to be the place where procurement and supplier intelligence kind of harmonizes to provide you with all the things you need to make good strategic decisions, right? So how your data fits together and how easy it is to get that data is a key part of that, which is why we're quite excited to see how today's feature ties into that kind of principle, because we do believe that using artificial intelligence is becoming more and more important, and this is one of the first and one of the bigger steps we're taking into that space. So it's going to be super interesting for both us, but also hopefully everyone who's watching today. Great. This is today's agenda, and we'll start with the first agenda point, which is contract blind spots and artificial intelligence. So what I wanted to do today is also tell just a little bit of a story in regards to understanding the problem that we see a lot with quite a few customers in terms of using contracts. What we see is that procurement teams are often very, very strong on the side of actually getting the contract in place, right? They know how to do their routines, run the RFI process, run an RFP, do everything that they can to get that signature signed. And once that contract is signed, it kind of goes into some kind of storage place. It gets put somewhere, but it's not always very diligently followed up on. And this is as a result of a lot of conversations both I've had, but also Alan and his team has had with some of our customers, is that where this contract is stored really isn't always super clear. Some people have it in SharePoint. Some people make an Excel list of all the different contracts. Some are more advanced. They have a contract management system, something like House of Control, where they store all their contracts. But it really depends on who you are and where you are in that kind of journey with the contracts. So do you actually know where those contracts are stored is a big question. If I were to ask Alan, for example, can you find me the contract for this supplier? And can he do that within maybe a minute or two, right? That's an important question that should be quite easy to solve internally, but if it's not, then it's maybe something to start looking into, right? The same applies for contract terms. One thing is knowing where that contract and the document actually is, but do you know what the start date and the end date of the contract is? Do you know the specific terms you have with that given supplier? Is everything clear in regards to what your commitments are? Without that context and without actually being aware of them, then you run into the challenge of actually having quite a lot of like contractual risk, right? What you don't want to be doing is missing key renewal windows. You don't want to be missing on certain terms that you have signed with your customers, where maybe either you or the supplier are not delivering properly. And so these kind of risks is what we're trying to mitigate as well, and it is what we see as big challenges currently with contracts, right? Because the more opportunities you miss, the more chances there are that from a business perspective, things might not go so great, right? So the big question then is, why should we upload contracts to Ignite, right? Some of you may be thinking, well, we already have all the contracts we need in a different system. We already apply all that metadata to another system. Great. but why should we also then upload these contracts to Ignite? And it's a valid question. We're not a contract lifecycle management system. We don't do, the process from A to Z with a contract. We're not legally invested the same way that those softwares are. But what we can provide is insight that contract can connect to, right? So there's huge benefits in putting your contracts into Ignite, because the second that they do get put into Ignite, they do get connected to that spend data that you have, and you can start to draw parallels between the contract and the spend data. So you can start looking at contract coverage. You can start looking at if the payment dates on the contract are the same as the payment terms that you have stipulated in the invoices. So there's quite a lot of interesting connections that you can start to do there, right? But more importantly, adding that contract adds it to what we call the supplier dimension in Ignite, right? So if you're already looking at your supplier information and you have things like the ISO certifications that they have, you have the code of conduct, adding that contract as an additional dimension becomes a really powerful tool, because then you know that everything that you need for a specific supplier is there on that page, including that spend dimension, right? And then you can always dive into the contract to look at all the specific terms at a later point too. So Alan will show you a bit later how this works and how we pull this information with that AI. But it's very important to kind of highlight that you are actually able to get a lot of insight by also putting your contracts into Ignite in these situations. In terms of the impact of that artificial intelligence being a part of that process, we're able to use the AI to automatically upload that contract. So it can instantly fill out the applicable information. So it finds the start and the end date, it finds the supplier, it finds the right contact person, which is the person who signed the contract on behalf of that supplier. And you don't actually have to then Control F and try to find that information yourself. It just automatically does it for you. So you're saving a bunch of time, and all you need to do is kind of validate that data. You don't actually have to do the steps of trying to find everything that you're looking for at all times, right? In terms of the actual storage and ownership of it as well, what we can do is you can upload that contract and you can assign it as a contract owner. So for example, if Arne was working within a specific company, he was responsible for a category, he could assign specific contracts to himself so that he always gets his updated list of his contracts that he's responsible for. And this is another thing where you can then start to kind of delegate these contracts to different areas of your business, which is another benefit that you get on top, right? Lastly, what's cool is that in terms of missing opportunities, what the AI will also do is it'll automatically suggest you specific reminders or reminders for the contracts, right? So if you have an end date on a specific contract, it will tell you, okay, we're going to set up an automatic reminder that 3 months before that contract goes out, you'll get an email saying, hey, keep in mind this contract is expiring, and that gives you enough time to then go and either do like a new RFI or RFP process to find a new supplier, or you can then use all that information you have on the supplier card to then do a full renegotiation with that supplier to see if you do want to continue doing business with them, right? So the AI kind of ties in where it pulls that information out for you and puts it front and center, but then it helps you take those strategic decisions by connecting everything as well, right? So there's quite a lot to cover, and Alan will take it a little bit from here, but let's have a look at what's new and how we can use it as well. So would you like to go into some specifics?
Yes, thank you for the introduction, Martin. Let's talk about what's new and how this benefits you. Martin has already talked about some core contract challenges and how AI can help with this. And we believe that primarily AI contract extraction can save you a lot of time. With this automated extraction, all you need to do is upload the document, and the solution then automatically extracts the key information so that you do not have to fill in anything manually. In addition to this, it also ensures way better data accuracy and completeness, because we can, in the background, run this process and identify and highlight either missing or wrong data that we can then highlight for you to quickly review if you want to approve it or dismiss it to improve for every contract that you already have in place. And finally, it gives you the ability to quickly validate critical information. For instance, if you're going into a supplier meeting or have a discussion internally, you can quickly check that, yes, this is in fact true, so that you can stay in control of your contracts. On the right-hand side here, you can see a glimpse of what I'm going to show with the contract on the right-hand side and the key fields extracted and highlighted from the contract. And this means less time spent on reviewing and finding information and rather focusing on what matters. And to you, Martin, do you see some benefits or usage from your customers?
Yeah, absolutely. So I wanted to bring up a specific case here with one of my customers that's been working a little bit with the extraction already. So it's been out for about 2 weeks, hasn't it, Alan? So some customers have already started using this feature already, trying to find some use cases. And I've been working with a quite large multinational company that has different offices all around the globe. And they're using it in a specific way that I think really encapsulates how you can start to work with contract extraction in a good way and a scalable way as well for most businesses. So as with most enterprise customers, this means that they cover a large scope of different countries and languages, right? Both internally at the company, so in all the different business units that are globally, both in Asia, Europe, and towards North America and so on, but also the contracts that they sign with their suppliers, right? Typically, if you're signing a contract in Germany, that specific contract is going to be in German, right? And it's not a given that everybody who's working within a team knows all the different languages. So what they're doing is they're using our AI contract extraction, where they're then uploading the documents with one central team in one specific business unit in Southeast Asia. And what's cool about that is that they don't actually need to speak that language. The AI itself, it speaks around 200 different languages, I think, and it should be able to pull out the basic information that we need from those contracts to put them into Ignite without any problems. And they can then circumvent that whole kind of play where you have to then ask for a specific translation, double check with a colleague if it's correct, especially if there's time zones involved. Maybe that colleague is not even online until later in the evening, so there's a wait time before it comes in. But with us, what we've seen is you can just upload that contract, and then you write a short message to the colleague saying, like, I've uploaded this contract, I've tagged you as the owner, just double check the information is correct. And Ignite will always tell you this is what the source of that data is, which we'll show you later. And then automatically, you've kind of saved yourself a bunch of time to actually put those contracts in, right? In addition, you can also use that validation feature that Anne was talking a little bit about, which is where if you have the main contract document uploaded, it will highlight discrepancies. So, for example, if there wasn't a set end date on a specific contract, but it does exist in the contract, we will suggest it. And so you can actually then try and find discrepancies or manual errors that exist, which this customer is then doing across the base of contracts that they have Ignite, just to double check that somebody didn't make a mistake, which could be quite costly depending on what data has been inputted, right? If you get a month and a day wrong when you input it manually, could have big implications for the business if it's a big contract and you need to track that renewal. So that's just some use cases of what we see. There's, of course, many other ones, but let's jump into the more fun part, which is taking a look at the product itself. So take it away, Aaron.
Yes, perfect. I will now go into Ignite, so stay with me. Great. Hopefully you now see an intuitive and lean homepage of Ignite. There, here you can find the main page of Ignite. It's simple to quickly navigate to wherever you need. For the sake of this demo, I will focus on the contract part, but also tying it a bit into the category and spend profiles in Ignite. So I am imagining that I am responsible for one category. I'm responsible for the food and cafeteria, and I have highlighted it here. So I want to go in and check status on this one. In Ignite, we have these category profiles to give you a complete view of a category from all the relevant dimensions, that being spend, contracts, suppliers, emissions, etc. You can see it here, and here I can see, for instance, the spend development in my category. But I am interested in the contract lens, and I will check the contract coverage of my category. That means how much of my spend is covered by a contract. And when I look at the development, I can see here a split of the spend for the different years, of how much is on contract and how much is outside of contract. I'm doing a pretty good job in 21, 22, and 23, but something has happened in 24. I'm completely behind. And if I scroll further down, I can see what suppliers are in this category and the contract status for these suppliers. What I see here is that I have 2 big suppliers where the contracts have expired, and generally I have a very little coverage of my suppliers. Also, I see that I have a supplier that is quite big and where the spend is increasing a lot. So I think, yeah, here is some potential to follow up and maybe get a contract in place. To further this investigation, it's very simple to go into the supplier profile. Again, we have these profiles where we want to give you a complete view of either the category or the supplier. So here you can find all the information you need. If we now fast forward a bit, and let's say I have followed up with that supplier, I have actually been able to negotiate good terms. And I see now on the contract side, I do not have a contract, but I have negotiated a contract. And one way to get the contract into Ignite is to add it directly from the supplier. When I click Add Contract here, it's possible to just add in the fields manually, but it's also possible to drag in the document. And that is part of what we have been working on now. So I find my document, I drag it in, and here you can see the actual contract on the right-hand side here. And on the left-hand side, you see the basic contract fields. And what we did quite quickly is that we process this document and start to extract the key fields. Before going further, and I will come back to this, your data stays private. We do not train any model or something on your documents. Here you can see different fields that we extract, for instance, start date, end date, and more. What we have heard from several customers is that they are super excited about AI and the potential. And it can be it can speed up processes. But if the suggestions are wrong, it kind of ruins the entire fundament. So we have been very conscious of making it transparent and easy to trace back where we find information. So when I look at the start date here, I can very easily validate that information from the document. And this applies to all the suggestions we extract from the documents. I'm quite pleased with this, so I want to add the contract. I can see now that, yes, now I have a contract on my supplier, but I actually want to dive a bit more into the actual contract. Then we have a complete page for that contract where you have the key information as the main block of the page. Again, wanting to make it super simple to validate and double check information. So if you are a bit unsure, you can easily see where we found the information. Also, for me, it's actually quite important that I want to have it only tied to my category. So I can also add these changes into the contract. And here you can also see that we have the document that we uploaded initially. Martin also talked about we obviously need to have the ability to set contract owners, control who has access to the contract. We also tried to extract and standardize as much information as possible, and we'll continue to further this going forward. And here we have, for instance, found a contact person that might be relevant, and yeah, it looks reasonable, and I actually want to provide it into the contract. And also, when we find on the creation, when we found the end date, we also automatically set these alerts. You can obviously do not have them enabled, but so that you get reminded before the end date so that you can follow up with the supplier. For a contract, we also believe that a contract has a starting point, but it also evolves over time. And that's why we want to make it very easy to have a complete view of that history for the contract over time. So whenever you add an amendment or any changes that you want to be reflected into the contract, either for your own sake or for someone else, you can add it in and you can see a complete log of that contract. Now I'm quite excited about the contract. I can also mention that even though we have these standard fields, it's also possible to have more fields on each contract. And I want to go back into my category, and if I now have a look here, I can see that Milk, the supplier I uploaded a contract to, now has an active contract, which is great. And generally, if I were responsible for this category, I would very likely continue the effort following up with more of this supplier to increase the contract coverage of my suppliers in this category. So this was a quick demo of the contract AI extraction, but also tying it into the spend connection. We believe contract and spend ties very well together, and also contracts and suppliers, that everything comes together in one place. Great, let's go back into the presentation. Cool, this one, great. And yeah, as we wrap up this demo, also want to share some thoughts on what we're working on and how we think about this. We believe that, or we are quite confident that these contract documents contain immense value in all the terms that you negotiate with your suppliers, the different clauses, and kind of reflects a very hard work. We have already started to extract and standardize some information, the most basic information, but we want to continue to standardize more and more of this information, and especially so that we can connect it together with the rest of the procurement data. One example we are working on now is extracting these contracted payment terms. For a lot of our customers, they also have we can calculate payment terms from their invoices. We can then connect them and compare so that you can easily identify gaps from what the contracted terms are versus what you actually get from your suppliers, and easily follow up to potentially realize quick savings. And it's also possible to continue this. Some contracts contain, or for some contracts, you spend a lot of time negotiating good prices. That can be either in the contract document or in specific files or something. And if we're able to extract that and standardize it and structure it in a good way, and there exists information in the invoicing, we can start to compare these two to ensure that you actually get the prices that you have negotiated. Very often, there are invoicing or suppliers are not aware of that they are like pricing you or invoicing you above what you have negotiated. While there are a lot of value and potential in these documents, it can also be a huge mess. A lot of documents, they are long, complicated, and sometimes it can be difficult to have a complete view or control over all these different terms and clauses. And we believe that identifying and flagging these non-standard clauses or terms is a very interesting way to mitigate risk. So we are super excited about this. We are eager to continue the work. We have worked with a lot of our customers. We are learning a lot from that, and we very much want to continue that. So if you have any questions or feedback on your challenges or what you believe could be valuable, then very open to talk to you. And yes, also said I would come back to this. We are quite excited about AI and kind of all the possibilities it can unlock, but we also believe we have to use it in a smart way. And for this, to begin, we saw it as very important to build trust. And for the first part, we I can talk a bit about how we have done that with regards to how it is set up on the data part. All our infrastructure is run on Google Cloud Platform, so we are compliant on the regional data requirements and standards. And then we run everything inside and contained within this environment so that we do not rely on any third parties or expose data outside of the environment where it is already contained. As mentioned, we do not train any model or anything on your data. And so that's very important for us to just mention that safety and transparency is key for how we have structured this work. That's also why we have used Gemini 2.5 Flash, which we can use in this environment, but it is also one of the most advanced AI models available today. And as Martin mentioned, this also lets us support over 200 languages, including Norwegian and Swedish, so that it can work well locally, but also globally. So that we have huge belief in AI and its potential to unlock a lot of new opportunities, but also want to do it in the right way.
Great.
Very good.
Awesome. So as Alan mentioned, it's one step in the direction that we're taking to implementing more and more features of artificial intelligence across the platform. I see that we're getting quite a lot of questions rolling in, which is fantastic. Of course, we're going to take the time now to sit down and answer quite a few of them. I think it seems like a few of them have been touched upon already, but I'll take it from down the list, and then we'll try and get things sorted as easily as possible here. So, Amer, you asked who decides what basic contract data is, let's say payment terms. So in the first round of the release here, what we define as the basic contract data is then start and end date, the title of the contract. We're then pulling the supplier out as well as the core basic ones.
Title, description.
Yeah. And then also, I think renewal date, if it is stipulated in the contract, not always the case, but sometimes can be. These are our basic ones. And then, as Alan mentioned, payment terms are something that we are looking at. We do have some prototypes that are looking at pulling that out, but nothing that's been implemented yet on the customer side as well. But definitely very, very relevant question. We are looking at payment terms because it's super interesting, because that's a quick win to shoot an email saying like, hey, we have 60 days payment terms here. Why are you invoicing us with 30, right? That's a big win for most people.
Yeah, and also following up on that, we want to continue to do this for more fields. It has been quite important for us that the fields that we do extract, that we can reuse and leverage them across the platform. So that, for instance, when we talk about payment terms, that we do it properly so that we can connect it to, for instance, your invoices. But again, super open to feedback if there are specific fields that are important that can be standardized.
Yeah. And then Stefan, you asked, how do you solve the OCR of the scanned contracts or the contracts that cannot be scanned? So I believe at the moment we only scan PDFs, Alan. So unfortunately, any other kind of document at the moment is not scannable. I believe we're looking into how we can facilitate a couple more things, but I'm maybe not the right person to answer that.
Yeah, I can see we have seen that like a very huge percentage of the documents are PDFs. Some are Word, and that is a potential thing to look into. But other than that, very few file formats are being used for the contracts.
And as long as it's in PDF, the AI has no problem reading it. So kind of the analyzation of that text doesn't seem to be a problem in all the testing that we've done, at least so far. Gry, you touched upon.
Okay, can I just, Stefan said it wasn't about the format because PDF is also scanned. Okay, I'm actually not sure I fully understand it. But okay, you
can follow up with that one potentially later, Stefan, as well. But we'll get back to you via email probably. Gry, you asked, can you extract prices from the contract and compare it with the actual items purchased? You can answer that one, Alan. You spoke about it a bit earlier.
Yeah, we are super excited about this. We believe this can unlock a lot of savings for our customers. One caveat is that it does require that we can connect it to the line level invoices. So we need the price information in the spend and have the invoice lines. But if we have that, that's the goal. We cannot do it right now, but very eager to do this, yes.
Also, it seems like we do handle the scanned documents. We use Cloud Vision was a response I got also for you, Stefan. But yeah. Good. Ivar also asked, can the AI identify what department the contract is under? For example, IT, commercial, etc. This would make it easier to identify ownership of contracts that's already in the system, as there's still quite a lot of manual work, as the AI only works if the contract is marked as main contract. Yes.
Yeah, I think that's very good feedback. Not currently, but definitely something we can do. We have been a bit cautious about this, just so that they are set correctly. Because if we suggest that it should be for one department or one like region or something, and it's like it has been harder to validate that we're doing it good enough. But we want to be able to do that, yes.
And then there's also the question of ownership in terms of, is the person who's signing the contract on your supplier side actually the person who's the contract owner? In many cases not. So it's often quite difficult to put the contract owner because often the person signing off on it internally is not the person who's following up on that contract. It depends a bit on the company and responsibilities and so on, but that's been a challenge specifically for contract owner, right? Pernille asked, can you set when you would like to be alerted if a contract runs out? Absolutely. So the AI will always suggest, I think, 3 months in advance, I believe, isn't it?
Yeah. So yeah, you can easily change that.
And you can easily change it. You can set it to send you an email at any point or any date that you want for that specific contract. But absolutely best practice to enable the auto one, and then you can set any other reminders that you want. You'll also get that in the system, actually, when you go look at the contract list. There's a way to see which ones are expiring soon, and you can then follow up on those manually. And that's also worth periodically checking in on as well, because then you can get a bit more insight. Robert asked if there's a limitation for what file types. As we mentioned before, PDF only at this point. For docx, you could convert them to PDF probably and upload them. That would probably be my recommendation. But currently only PDF. Yeah. Håvard, is the AI contract part available for all yet? It should be. If it's not, then let us know. There should be a little chat icon in the bottom left of the platform. Send us a message there, and we'll look into it to see why it's not coming up on your Ignite workspace. But if you try and create a contract, there should be a place where you can drop the contract in. Christopher asked, have you considered a format of creating building contracts directly in Ignite contracts using standard forms or company-specific standards? Alan, maybe you have some more insight there?
Yeah, okay. Have you considered a format of creating contracts? Yeah, so I think Martin touched a bit upon it initially, that how much of the process we are covering of the contract lifecycle. We have not decided to focus on that. We have rather focused on kind of the later stages of connecting it and following up and renewing it. Yeah, not top of mind, but yeah.
There's a lot of interesting things to look at in terms of the contract kind of life cycle, but we're trying to keep it quite slim and procurement focused at the moment. And that's why that hasn't been a priority, at least for the moment. Silvana asked, when the contract is recently expired, do we receive an email informing that, or is it possible the stakeholder receives the same email? So you always need to set a specific alert in the system. There's nothing that automatically creates it unless you upload the contract and use the AI extraction at the moment. But absolutely, you can set up those reminders and alerts. This is also something we want to make a bit more smart in the future. But currently, you just need to create a manual alert for any contract you need a reminder on. Ola asked, I think you mentioned that this should be in addition to contractual management systems like House of Control, not instead of. Which typical areas do Ignite not cover compared to House of Control? In other words, why is Ignite not sufficient for contractual management? So my understanding here, because I have quite a few customers that are using House of Control, is that you have a lot more control in terms of the entire contract lifecycle part, right? You can create your contract templates. You can follow up. I think you can even sign in House of Control, right? From my understanding. And you have a big database of all the things that you want to look at. But those specific elements are things that we're not covering at the moment. So we're not here to make it so that you can, create the contract, add all the different line items that you want, to send it out to a customer, get them to sign, and collect it into the system. Would be super cool if we had it, but it's not something that we want to prioritize at the moment. Important for us is that that you have these contract documents available. You can go to suppliers and collect that information. And it's actually quite easy to kind of replicate what you have in House of Control, actually. You're going to pretty much export entire Excel of all the contracts you have, upload them to Ignite, and then you would just need to upload the specific PDFs to those contract elements, and you'd basically have a one-to-one mapping. And this can be facilitated with like a API and stuff like that. We have quite a few customers that do it. And getting that kind of contract coverage is then that key extra that you maybe don't get otherwise, right? In a system like House of Control, which is very just, these are your contracts, right? UL, how is spend data matched to the correct contract, and how is it determined which spend is within or outside of the scope of the agreement? So this is a good question. We're currently looking into ways to make this a bit more obvious in the system, but Ignite is flexible enough that you can do this in many different ways. The most common way that people connect their spend to their contract is that we look at two specific criteria, actually. So you're matching the supplier name to supplier name. So as long as the supplier in the contract is the same as the supplier in the transactions, great. And then we're looking at the transaction date or invoice date, and we're saying, okay, does the specific supplier have a transaction within the start and end date of that contract? And that is what we traditionally define as on contract or contracted spend. So as long as transactions are happening when that specific contract is valid, then that's on contract. The thing is, however, that depending on the data that you have and what you want to do, you can specify that even further. There are instances where people want to say, okay, well, maybe from a specific company, we're only buying a specific thing on contract. Then you would need to define that specific category, or maybe you have a specific invoice number that you're matching. There's a lot of things you can do to tweak it even further. But the typical one is just as long as there's a transaction happening between the start and end of the contract, we consider that on contract.
Yeah, I can also just comment there. So very much depending on the data quality. So for the, let's say, leading companies on data quality, if some of them have a contract reference in the contract and in the invoice, then we can just use that to connect the invoices directly to that contract. As you also saw in the demo, I tagged the contract with a category, and that is what Martin is talking about, that you can kind of, especially on the category and business unit, specify further for what parts of the spend should be tied to that contract.
Yeah, it's a pretty flexible system. If you want to know a bit more about what opportunities are there, then you can talk to your CSM, because they should also be able to help you show you a bit how that is connected in your system. Sabina asked, is it possible to add more basic contract fields that we as customers can add ourselves? In terms of any fields in the contract, Sabina, you can add as many columns or like fields in the contract as you want. How many of those get filled by the specific AI is a different story. So at the moment, only the ones that we spoke about before, so start date, end date, renewal date, title, supplier, description, and maybe contact person, I think, are the ones that we're pulling from the document with AI. But of course, if you have other fields that you know are specific to your company, you can add those to the contract in Ignite and fill those in manually, right? So we do support that, of course, as well. But for extraction, it's a bit of a different story. Shaheen asked, does Ignite have any customers or users in the public sector in Sweden? I'm a bit unsure. I think we would have to double check. We have quite a few Swedish customers, but how many of those are public, I'm not certain.
Yeah, and we have a lot of public sector in Norway.
In Norway, we definitely have a lot of public sector.
The overlap, yeah.
We at least have one Swedish commune then, don't we?
Yeah, I can follow up on the specifics.
Yeah. But I think there's a few use cases there, Shaheen, but we'll definitely follow up with you. Elsa asked, how does it work with addendum agreements with new terms or prices? This is a great question because it's one of the things that we're also looking to explore as a kind of a next step, because you have to upload something as a main contract document for it to do the AI extraction, right? But let's say the end date is approaching, you've done a renegotiation, you create an addendum that you want to then add to that specific contract. That should, in theory, overwrite what it is on the main contract document you had before, right? So this is what we're looking at as kind of a next step as well, is that how do we handle these extra documents that you're adding? Because oftentimes those are more relevant, right, than the existing older document. And this is very typical as well. You see that in like CRM systems, when you have like one deal and then you update that deal and et cetera, et cetera. It's always kind of a mess with all the different contracts and so on.
Yeah, I can also quickly comment on that one. So we have actually already started to test some prototypes for how this could work. But it can be quite messy and complicated to know kind of where things are coming from, and what is the right place that you should reference when, like, what is the source of truth? Because likely something should still reference the main document and something should be fetched from the new amendment and something from another file. So I think we just need to make sure that we are not making it more complicated to understand when we do something here. But yeah, really think we at some point need to solve this in a good way.
Yeah. And then a last question here from Sigurd. Can you train an internal copilot to find contract/data in Ignite? So a bit unsure what the question here is.
Yeah, again, I think something we have discussed a bit in the team is that if it might not be exactly what you're talking about, but just letting, for instance, the user put in some prompts and then have the free text fields of extracting into that. could be possible to have some form of overlay that you can prompt and ask. Like probably also possible to the first one. The kind of key challenge there is that what is the reusability value of that? Because can you actually connect it to anything, or would it just be for having it filled in one specific field for you to reference at a later point? Could be. And on the prompting part, that was a potential direction that we could go in from the start. But there, the kind of like main concern from our side was that if we just give you answers but cannot reference why we say that or where we find that answer, it's very difficult to build a right level of trust. But when we are able to have the core building blocks in order, it's easier to kind of overlay something like that on the top. So not promising anything, but I think I'm also using AI tools. So I think there can be a lot of possibilities there.
And one thing that I also want to reiterate is that, of course, if there's anybody here that wants to talk to either Alan and his team and give feedback around contracts and the way this AI extraction works, we'd love to hear from you. So please reach out to us if there is a specific thing that you want to discuss with us. We obviously want to make our product as good as possible, and our customers' feedback is super important in that regard. So absolutely, if you feel like you have something interesting to share with us, or you want to share some insider feedback, please let us know. It helps us a lot. Great. No other questions have rolled in. We're going to give it one more minute here, and then we're going to wrap things up. But so far, I think it's been a very productive session. I'm very happy with everything that we've gone through today. Looks like we have one last question here. Thanks for the training. You're absolutely welcome, Roberta. So hopefully everybody had gotten some good insight here. I hope everybody tries to upload a document later today. It should be relatively straightforward. You can either do it straight from the supplier profile, or you can go to the contract list and create a contract from there. So give it a go. Let us know how it goes. And then we hope everybody has a great day forwards.
Perfect.
Have a good one.